So we've got our data. And then start thinking about how we're going to use that data. Clearly we're going to want to analyze search patterns, understand responses, but we probably, as we go through that, we want to dig into the data quite a lot. But in that time, we want to make sure we retain a focus and not get lost into what I would call analysis paralysis. So it's a good idea up front that we have some fairly clear objectives about what we're going to look for. And over the next few slides, I'll talk about these sorts of things. Things like searches and bookings, Aspire activity, and perhaps even auditing. In fact, I think we'll address auditing quite early. So just while we're on the subject of data, before we move off into KPIs, clearly we're monitoring and pulling what we call raw XML, so the type of text type information you saw in those slides. We're pulling that off the network, and then we're processing and analyzing it. That raw XML can be retained for a period of time. It's very, very large. So for all traffic, we might retain it for just a short period of time. Okay, maybe by short I mean something like 48 hours. But that's really supporting us for diagnostic reasons, if you're on the IT side, or if you need to handle some query about something and really understand what's going up and down the wire, then you've got the raw information, the evidence, if you like. Now, for what I refer to as the revenue traffic, so the bookings, the cancellations, the modifications, I might want to actually keep the raw XML. It's a relatively small volume of traffic in comparison to, say, searches. So we might actually want to keep all of the XML for that, simply as a long-term audit. But the objective here then is really to provide a backdrop so that if there are any queries on any particular transactions from a supplier or indeed a client, an agent, then we have the evidence, and we can share that evidence and say, look, this is what happened, and hopefully there's a dispute, we can resolve it faster, and everybody kind of understands what really went on. So when I sort of move off and start looking at my data, probably the first place I'm going to start is with doing some market demand analysis. Typically, this is going to be probably around destinations. I may want to focus on specific times and seasons, or maybe there's specific events coming at specific locations that we're particularly concerned about. But having data, obviously, to support those types of analysis is quite important. It could be price sensitivity. I might look at the pricing of things in certain areas. But there's plenty of other things in this data, clearly, that can be pulled out. So examples would be adults and children being searched for. And that could be a great surrogate marker, if you like, for understanding whether a particular request or a booking for that matter is business or leisure, whether it's part of a piece of free independent travel, or whether it's part of a group, or whether it's part of a meeting, a conference, or an incentive activity. Or it could be more down at the sort of techie level, so we're looking at where the request came from, and if we're an organization that's running smartphone apps, typically those are using XML-based services straight into our systems. We can kind of understand where those requests are coming from and what's being asked for. These are all the sorts of things that we can get up to. And if we're clever about it, we can start doing things like more sophisticated revenue management, a revenue management that's really driven by demand. Most of the revenue management stuff that you see talked about out there is terribly focused on maintaining a level of parity with competitive sets in terms of pricing, but nobody ever seems to answer the question of why your competitor is a certain price. Okay, and price generally in most markets is driven by demand. And then if you get really sophisticated about that, then maybe you start thinking about things like dynamic pricing.